The most influential car brands of all time. Lancia was founded in the early 20th century, just like many other car brands we know and love today. It was founded on November 29th, 1906, by Fiat racing drivers Vincenzo Lancia and his furlough friend Claudio Fogolin. The company was founded in Turin, Italy, and the first car they made was the Tipo 51, or 12 HP, later called Alpha. It remained in production from 1907 to 1908, and had a small four-cylinder with 28 horsepower. Lancia was very well known for its innovations. The first one it instated was in the Dieta, which was produced in 1913. It was the first car that had full electrical equipment as standard. Additionally, Lancia was the first manufacturer to make a car with a monocoque chassis in the Limbada, produced from 1922 to 1931. It also had a sliding pillar independent thrust suspension design that actually incorporated the spring and the damper together as a single unit, which was very ahead of its time. And as most people know, it's super common now to have the hydraulic damper inside of the spring, and we see this most commonly in the McPherson strut, which many cars use today. Additionally, they were made the first car with a 5-speed gearbox in the Series 3 Ardea, and they also made the first production V6 engine in the 1950 Aurelia. They also had many experimentations with V8, V12s, and they were actually the first manufacturer to produce a V4 engine. Now, going back to the Aurelia, it was one of the first great cars they made. As I said earlier, it had a V6, which was kind of very revolutionary at the time, and now many cars today use V6s. It was a 60-degree angle of the V, and it had decent success in racing. It won the Targa Florio of 1952. I actually got 1, 2, 3, so the first 3 places. It also won the Liège Rome Liège of 1953, and going back to 1951, it got second place in the Miglia, only second to the Ferrari 340 America, which would later go on to Le Mans and get 12th place. So they did have the Aurelia did have decent success in motorsport. Soon after, they participated in Formula One in the 1954 season, and they managed to get their hands on two-time reigning world champion Alberto Ascari. And in the first event, he took pole position and qualifying in qualifying and fastest lap, although his clutch failed, and then he also died in an accident. And so this plus Lancia's economic problems made them actually sell the company, the Lancia family. The car was later given to Ferrari, and they developed their own car out of it. And actually Fangio, Juan Manuel Fangio, won the 1956 World Championship for the drivers with the car under Ferrari, but the car was originally made by Lancia. So they kind of got an F1 win, not really. The next car I want to talk about is the Fulvia, and this was really the first car that we see in the World Rally Championship. It used a very small angle V4 engine, and again, the V4 engine's pretty weird. The only car I can think of right now that uses it is actually the Saab, the old Saabs, the Saab Sonnet, had a V4 engine. Uh, the Just like this Saab, the Fovea was front wheel drive, and it had independent front suspension with wishbones. And uh, the Fovea was known for its rally success and its help in winning the 1974 to 76 seasons. Also, there was the Stratus, which was very well known. Uh, it was used to win many rallies, again, those same years, 74 to 76. It used a 2.5 liter V6 from the Ferrari Dino. So it had a very nice engine, and it was kind of notoriously difficult to control because it had a very short wheelbase and was extremely wide, so it was kind of very twitchy. But that being said, it was extremely successful and was the main car in, again, the 1974 to 1976 victories. There was then that car after that that also helped in those years. So those 3 years in a row was also, there was a small amount of Lancia Beta Coupes that were there was actually, I believe, one driver who won a couple races or got a couple points with it. So I wanted to mention that car as well. Uh, but of course, I think the most notorious car they were known for was their Lancia Delta. And they made and then in Group B, again, this was the car that uh, was very infamous in Group B in the form of the S4, and then later, but we'll discuss that after we talk about the 037. Now, the Lancia 037 was a homologation car, so there was only few made for the streets, but it was the last rear-wheel drive car to win the World Rally Championships. So while other car manufacturers like Audi with the Quattro were moving more towards the all-wheel drive direction, Lancia decided to attempt a rear-wheel drive World Rally Championship victory. And really, they had a very big disadvantage on the low traction rally stages and on gravel in the snow. There were some advantages to rear wheel drive, like it's lighter and it's simpler. And they did manage to win that season, and it was the last rear wheel drive ever to win. And although, be it they kind of twisted some of the rules, I mean, they used them to their advantage. Like in some of the races, they entered many, like 4 or 5 cars, so that they could get all the positions with high points. So they kind of strategically placed their cars in the races they win. And I believe they didn't even show up to one of the races, rally stages, because they knew they're not gonna win. So they're just like, there's no point. And they still managed to win. And then after that, they had to move to the Lancia Delta, which I mentioned earlier, because they knew that that was kind of the future of World Rally, was all-wheel drive. So then they developed the S4, which was a very unique Group B car. Uh, Although it actually didn't win any of the Group B rallies and the World Rally Championship during Group B, it was still a very impressive car. Nowadays, they sell for about $500,000 to $1 million. The Lancia Delta had a 500 horsepower, about 4-cylinder, 1.8 liter engine. I believe was kind of co-developed with Abarth, and it's twin charged, meaning that it has a supercharger and a turbocharger. Now, a quick kind of lesson. The benefits of twin charging are kind of interesting because you got many benefits. So now you, first of all, you get similar benefits like with twin turbo cars. So if you have 10 psi of of pressure from the supercharger and 10 psi from the turbocharger, they actually don't combine to get 20. They kind of actually like grow. So you actually kind of get 30 psi, so you get a lot more boost pressure, which is good. But I think more importantly, as you can see in this graph, you actually get power throughout the rev range because, as most people know, superchargers provide good low end power while turbochargers take time to kick in. So that's turbo lag, but then they kick in at high RPM. So you kind of got the supercharger covering for the turbo lag, but then you got the turbo on the high RPM. And it was actually the only Group B car to kind of use this to its advantage. And it is interesting. And it does give you an advantage in those kind of low speed corners, on those tight corners where you do need to get on the power immediately. Then on May 2nd, 1986, disaster struck. And here's a short clip showing what happened.
No one knows what happened on that lonely road or why the Lancia should leave the road where it did, exploding and killing both Toivonen and Cresto instantly. It was the darkest day that the sport has ever known. Henry Toivonen and the supercars might have been created for each other. Together, on May 2nd, 1986, they died.
So here you could see that actually on this day, Henry Toivonen in an S4 crashed out of the rally stage. Both him and his co-driver died, and just a few days later, Group B was ended. This was kind of a heavy hit to a lot of car manufacturers, and they decided to pull out of rally because it would ruin their reputation. You know, they kind of like you don't want to have the reputation of making cars that are deadly, right? That's not particularly a good reputation. So many car manufacturers dropped out. Interestingly enough, actually, the Delta was pretty close to the Peugeot, the 205 in that season. Most likely, if it continued, the Peugeot would have won, but I guess there was some chance. But nevertheless, a lot of teams withdrew from the sport, but Lancia decided to stay, which was a great choice because they already had a great platform in the S4. And then with the new platform, they moved the engine back into the front, reduced its power because of the new regulations, and then raced in Group A. And the new Lancia Delta, known as the Lancia Delta Integrale, which had many versions. There was the 8 valve, 16 valve, and then there was the Evolution 1, Evolution 2. There was a lot of, it's kind of confusing, but there was a lot of different models. But nevertheless, that was really when they got their victories. They got 6 years in a row, which is kind of crazy in World Rally. So they got 1987 all the way to 1982, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. That's like 6 years of straight up win after win after win. I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling, really. And it's kind of similar to the situation we have with Mercedes in Formula One right now, where they have so many, they're just so dominant. And nowadays they make some like cheap city cars, and this was really their glory days. And again, not that they were completely uncontested, but they were just dominant for those years, and they did have many of the greatest drivers at the time, which did help them win. Uh, the demise kind of came after that. After the end of that 6-year reign, they were again a sub brand of Fiat, and they didn't really sell particularly well. And they slowly demise, and now they still do exist, but they produce small city cars, just like many other Fiat brands, and they're not very well known. Which is kind of unfortunate, because they were at one point arguably the greatest car brand of all time. And Jeremy Clarkson, from the old Top Gear and his companions, they praised Lancia very much because all their cars look really good. They're kind of the boyish styling with the flares, and it's kind of a very up and down history you got from the beginning, with the early F1 success, I'd say mild success that Aurelia had, and then you got to the 10 WRC wins, which is still the most to this day any manufacturer has gotten. And even though Lancia hasn't raced for um 20 years, they're still in that top place because they're just that dominant and their cars were just that good. Yeah, and that's it.